He didn't build a mansion, he built a fortress. No HOA, no permits, no shortcuts, just one man, a blueprint, and a promise: this house will never fall. For 8 years, neighbors laughed. Then the earthquake came, and silence followed. Every home around him crumbled, except his. But instead of praise, he got accusations. The HOA that once mocked him now claimed he caused the destruction. Deepfakes, lawsuits, and lies, all to bury one truth: his honesty survived where their greed collapsed. This isn't just about a house that beat the quake, it's about a man who did too. Nick Morgan never wanted luxury, he wanted freedom. While most people dreamed of gated communities and spotless lawns, Nick dreamed of open skies and silence. 8 years ago, he found it, a forgotten stretch of land at the edge of the valley, where cell signals died and rules didn't reach. No HOA fees. No nosy neighbors. No one to tell him the color of his fence or how high his grass should be. Just earth, sky, and time. He parked his old pickup under an oak tree, looked over the rocky soil, and smiled. It'll do. With his dog, Boone, by his side, Nick began to build. Every nail, every beam, every inch of foundation was his. He didn't hire contractors, he trusted his hands more than anyone else's. Rebar crossed beneath concrete like veins of steel. Hurricane straps held the frame tighter than any code required. People called him stubborn. He called it prepared. At night, the valley was black and quiet, the stars brighter than streetlights had ever allowed. Boone would bark at coyotes while Nick sat by a small fire, sketching blueprints for perfection, not fancy, just unbreakable. He built the roof to survive winds, the walls to resist fire, and the base to absorb shock. Every detail was personal, deliberate, unapproved by anyone but him. And when the house finally stood complete, solid, simple, and strong, Nick didn't see just a home. He saw a statement. A reminder that strength isn't built in comfort or committee meetings. It's built one bolt, one brick, one man's will at a time. He didn't know it yet, but that stubborn strength would soon be tested by the earth itself. By the time most people were sipping coffee in air-conditioned homes, Nick Morgan was already knee-deep in concrete. He worked alone, dust on his face, sweat in his eyes, and a quiet determination that could bend steel. He wasn't just building a house, he was engineering survival. Every choice had purpose. He sank rebar twice as deep as the code demanded. Poured concrete thicker than city standards. When the nearest hardware store clerk joked, "You're overdoing it," Nick only smiled. That's the point. While others trusted blueprints drawn by strangers, Nick trusted instinct. He tested soil density with his own hands, adjusted beam weight until the balance felt right. Every nail, every hinge, every welded joint had his fingerprint. Weeks turned to months. Then years. Through rain, through summer heat, the structure grew, a steel skeleton wrapped in stubbornness. When silver pines began developing nearby, the new residents drove by in their polished SUVs, shaking their heads. "That guy's wasting his life," one laughed. There's no market for paranoia. But Nick didn't care. He wasn't building for the market. He was building for the moment no one believed would come. At night, he'd walk through the half-finished rooms, Boone's paws echoing on bare floors. He'd whisper to the wood and concrete, "You'll hold." And when the final bolt locked, when the last beam met its mark, Nick stepped back and looked at his creation, raw, powerful, ready. It wasn't beautiful by HOA standards. It was honest. What the world saw as overbuilt, the earth would soon test for truth. And only then would everyone learn what Nick already knew: real strength doesn't ask for approval. For 6 quiet years, Nick Morgan lived in peace. His house stood solid, his garden grew wild, and Boone chased rabbits through the tall grass. Then one morning, the silence broke, not from thunder, but from paperwork. A white envelope lay nailed to his fence post, stamped in bold letters, "Notice of Violation, Silver Pines Homeowners Association." Nick frowned. Silver Pines was a new development half a mile away, a kingdom of freshly paved streets, trimmed lawns, and people who waved like robots. He wasn't part of it. He'd bought his land years before their existence. Still, the letter demanded that he remove non-compliant fencing and restore the property's visual harmony. He laughed out loud. Visual harmony, he muttered. Try structural integrity. Days later, she arrived. Karen Whitmore, Silver Pines HOA president. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect arrogance. She pulled up in a spotless SUV, heels sinking slightly in Nick's dirt driveway. Mr. Morgan, she said sweetly, your property falls within our oversight. We need to discuss conformity standards. Nick wiped his hands on his jeans. Lady, this isn't your kingdom. Karen's smile didn't fade. Everything within 1 mile of Silver Pines is subject to review. Then review the air, Nick replied, turning back to his work. That moment, that defiance, planted the seed of a feud that would grow into war. Within weeks, more letters came. Fines. Threats. HOA officers photographing his home like it was a crime scene. Nick didn't budge. He hired attorney Jennifer Lawson, who proved in court that his land deed predated Silver Pines by years. Case dismissed. Karen lost the battle, but not her obsession. And obsessions, like earthquakes, start small until they shake everything. The courtroom smelled of dust and coffee, a mix of bureaucracy and boredom. But for Nick Morgan, this was personal. He sat calm, sleeves rolled, watching the HOA lawyer stumble through paperwork like a student who hadn't done his homework. Jennifer Lawson, sharp, unflinching, and dangerously polite, stood beside Nick. Your Honor, she said, sliding a document forward, Mr. Morgan's property was purchased 8 years before Silver Pines broke ground. The HOA has no legal jurisdiction. Judge Alvarez leaned back, scanning the file. Seems clear to me, he said, dropping the gavel. Case dismissed. Karen Whitmore's smile froze midair. She had expected an easy win, a signature, a fine, maybe a little humiliation for the man who dared to ignore her letters. Instead, she'd been publicly embarrassed. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked questions. Karen brushed past them, sunglasses hiding fury. But cameras still caught the look, the one that says, this isn't over. Nick, meanwhile, simply tipped his hat to Jennifer. Guess we're done here, he said. Jennifer smiled. With her? Not a chance. For a while, peace returned. The mail stopped bringing threats. The phone stopped ringing. Even Boone stopped barking at every engine that slowed on the dirt road. But Karen was planning something far bigger than another notice. In her pristine Silver Pines office, she met with developers, engineers, and one man who specialized in digital reputation management. If we can't control him legally, she said, we'll destroy him publicly. That night, Nick stood outside under the stars, sipping coffee on his porch. The wind was calm, the air still. He had no idea that the next battle wouldn't come from paper or courtrooms. It would come from the ground itself. It began with a sound no one could name. A deep metallic groan that rolled beneath the valley floor like thunder trapped underground. Nick Morgan woke instantly. Boone was already standing, ears back, growling toward the walls. Then the shaking started. Pictures crashed from the walls. Tools rattled off shelves. The coffee mug on his nightstand danced once and shattered. The floor he had built with his own hands bucked like a wave. Nick grabbed Boone and dove beneath the heavy oak table he'd reinforced himself. Easy, boy, easy. Outside, the world screamed. Trees snapped like bones. Distant explosions painted the horizon orange. From miles away, Silver Pines, that perfect little neighborhood, was crumbling. Roofs collapsed, gas lines burst, alarms wailed into the dark. But Nick's house stood. He felt it sway, just slightly, the way it was designed to. The rebar grid flexed, the walls held, the foundation breathed. Every nail, every joint, every stubborn decision he'd made was now being tested, and winning. After 2 minutes that felt like forever, the shaking stopped. Silence fell, heavy and unreal. Nick stepped outside barefoot, flashlight trembling in his hand. His yard was cracked open, the air smelled of smoke and dust. In the distance, faint cries echoed. Silver Pines was gone. Through the dust, Karen Whitmore stumbled barefoot across the road, robe torn, mascara streaked, eyes wild. She looked at Nick's house, untouched, solid as ever. "Of course yours is fine," she hissed. Nick met her glare, calm as stone. "I built it right." For a moment, the two stood there, the ruins of arrogance facing the proof of preparation. Neither knew it, but the real quake had only just begun. Morning came gray and silent, the kind of silence that follows tragedy. Smoke drifted over the valley. Houses were broken like toys. Silver Pines looked like a photograph torn in half. Nick Morgan spent the dawn digging survivors out with his bare hands. Boone stayed close, guiding rescuers through debris. By noon, FEMA trucks rolled in. Reporters followed soon after. Cameras panned across the ruins, then stopped on his house, the only one still standing. The whispers began. "How's it still there? Why didn't his collapse? Did he know something?" Karen Whitmore appeared hours later, wrapped in a blanket, face pale but eyes burning with something darker than grief. She stood before Nick's unbroken porch like it was an insult. "Everyone lost everything," she said, voice trembling with rage. "Except you." Nick looked around at the wreckage. "I'm sorry for what you lost. But I built for this." Her lip curled. "Built for it, or caused it?" Nick blinked. "What?" But Karen had already turned away, whispering to a nearby reporter. That night, social media exploded. Posts from HOA residents claimed Nick had used illegal seismic equipment while building. Someone uploaded an old photo of him welding, twisted into a false narrative, local man experiments with soil vibration tech. In less than 24 hours, the survivor became the suspect. Nick shut his phone off. Sat on his porch, Boone resting at his feet. The valley that once sounded like peace now buzzed with drones, reporters, and rumors. He had survived the quake, but not the envy it awakened. Because sometimes, the destruction doesn't come from the ground. It comes from people who can't stand that you're still standing. 3 days after the quake, Nick's mailbox coughed up a new envelope, thick, beige, and angry-looking. Notice of civil action. Filed by Silver Pines Homeowners Association. Claiming $15 million in damages. He laughed, once. Then twice. Then not at all. The document accused him of engineering sabotage, soil manipulation, even deliberately destabilizing neighboring structures. It read like a supervillain script written by someone who'd watched too many disaster movies. Karen's name was at the top. President, Silver Pines HOA. Of course. Nick called Jennifer Lawson, his old attorney, a woman who treated nonsense like it was allergic to her time. When she read the lawsuit, she muttered, "They're insane, but dangerously organized." The next day, things escalated. A local news station aired footage of Nick Morgan near the quake site, a grainy clip showing a man kneeling at night, placing something in the dirt. The caption screamed, "Exclusive, did this man cause the quake?" The internet lost its mind. Comment sections filled with theories, DARPA, CIA, secret experiments. Someone even claimed Nick had used geoengineering tech to test earthquake control. But Jennifer wasn't buying it. She sent the clip to a forensic analyst. 2 days later, the results came back, AI-generated deepfake. Metadata revealed it was rendered with consumer software, cheap, fast, malicious. "They're not suing you," Jennifer said. "They're trying to erase you." Nick stared at the paused frame of his fake self on her laptop. A counterfeit version of him, planting a bomb that never existed. He felt something shift inside. Not fear. Not anger. Resolve. "They wanted a villain," he said quietly. "Fine. Let's show them what the real story looks like." Nick spent 3 sleepless nights at his desk, surrounded by blueprints, invoices, and coffee-stained notebooks. Every page was proof that he'd built with integrity, precision, and patience. If the world wanted to accuse him, he'd drown them in facts. He opened a blank document and began to write. This house didn't survive by luck. It survived because I didn't cut corners. What started as a response turned into a manifesto, 162 pages of design notes, rebar layouts, soil analyses, inspection records, and cost breakdowns. He titled it, Open Structural Report on Stone Bluff Road, Study in Earthquake-Resistant Design. When he hit publish, it was like lighting a fuse. Within hours, the file spread like wildfire, Reddit, engineering forums, even FEMA's inbox. By morning, it had over 30,000 downloads. Headlines flipped overnight. The man who built the Unbreakable house. His blueprint might change building codes forever. For the first time in weeks, the world stopped calling him a villain. Jennifer showed up that afternoon, tablet in hand, scrolling through the coverage with a grin. You just nuked their lawsuit, she said. With math. But not everyone was celebrating. Karen wasn't done. She appeared on local news again, tears weaponized, calling his report self-promotional propaganda. Nick didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was already louder than her voice. That night, he sat on the porch with Boone beside him. The neighborhood was silent again, not with fear, but with realization. He'd built a house to survive an earthquake. He hadn't realized he was building one to survive people. And now, for the first time, the ground was shifting under Karen. Karen Whitmore had ruled Silver Pines like a throne, polished smile, iron grip, and a Rolodex full of people who owed her favors. For years, she'd built her kingdom on fear and paperwork. But kingdoms fall, and this one began with a single leak. It arrived in Jennifer's inbox at 2:17 a.m. No name, no signature, just a message. You should see what your HOA president's been hiding. Attached were 67 pages of internal emails, proof that Karen and her board had been falsifying maintenance reports, inflating budgets, and pocketing disaster relief funds meant for homeowners. There it was, her entire empire, built not on community service but embezzlement. Jennifer sent the file straight to the state inspector's office. By noon, investigators swarmed the HOA headquarters. By evening, Karen's mansion was surrounded by news vans. When they led her out in handcuffs, she was still smiling for the cameras, a queen who couldn't believe her crown had melted. Nick watched the footage in silence. Not joy. Not revenge. Just release. He'd been accused, humiliated, nearly erased, all because of one woman's greed. Now, the same system that failed him was finally turning on her. Later that night, Jennifer called. They're charging her with fraud, forgery, and obstruction. She's finished. Nick looked at his house, still standing, still silent, still defiant. The quake didn't destroy her, he said quietly. The truth did. For the first time in months, he felt the air shift, light, clean, unburdened. The ground beneath him was steady again. And this time, it wasn't just his house that survived. It was him. Months passed. The earth was quiet again. No tremors, no sirens, just wind brushing against the hills of Silver Pines. Where ruins once stood, construction crews now worked carefully, rebuilding what was lost. But at the top of the road, one house remained untouched, Nick Morgan's home, the one that refused to fall. Reporters came and went. Engineers from universities requested tours, studying his design. What they called luck, Nick called patience. What they called innovation, he called honesty. He stood on his porch one morning, coffee in hand, Boone at his side. Across the street, new neighbors waved, not with suspicion this time, but with quiet respect. Jennifer arrived later with papers in hand. The state wants to use your blueprint, she said, as part of a new seismic safety code. Nick smiled. Good. Maybe next time, more houses will stand. When the cameras left and the sun began to dip, he walked around his property, touching the walls, the foundation, the soil. Everything he'd built had been tested by the earth itself, and by people far worse. Both had tried to break him. Neither succeeded. He paused at the gate, turning back to look at his house, strong, still, and alive. They said it was just a house, he whispered. But it stood for more than that. For courage. For truth. For the idea that when you build something with heart and purpose, it can outlast every storm, every quake, every lie. And as dusk settled over Stone Bluff Road, the last golden light hit the roof that never cracked. A quiet monument to one man's resilience. And the house that stood when the world fell.